What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today we'll be finishing up the Rogue Specialization Opinions of Castle Nathria series I started this week with what currently seems to be the new hotness of rogue-related things, Subtlety. So let's take a shadow step into Castle Nathria and see how things are going for the sneakiest spec of them all. Alright, so if you've seen my prior two videos covering Assassination and Outlaw, then great, you'll probably know the setup by now. If not, and you're interested in either of those two specializations of Rogue, I recommend checking out those videos. I'll link one of them up on top right now. As I've said before, these are just my opinions of each spec regarding things such as how they feel to play in Raid, the potential pros and cons of them, and my opinion of their viability. Any of my usual hamster brain thoughts that don't make it into the video or anything I think of after the fact will be pinned in a comment below, just as a heads up. Castle Nathria is the first raid of Shadowlands and contains a total of 10 bosses. A majority of these encounters have various forms of movement mechanics, even in lower difficulties. There are numerous mechanics that groups can assign players to take care of, however there are also plenty that automatically select their target. This results in a raid with a pretty sizable amount of uptime loss, especially as a melee DPS. Thankfully, Subtlety is probably the most well-equipped of the three specs to handle this. Subtlety is the only specialization of Rogue that has two charges of the movement ability Shadow Step. On top of that, it has the classic Rogue ability Sprint that they all share, but it also has another little bonus. Shadow Strikes when cast from true stealth will cause you to blink to the target. And it will also make the Shadow Strike deal 25% more damage, so that's a win-win in my book. Due to all of these movement abilities, Subtlety is definitely in a pretty strong place to deal with a lot of the mechanics in Castle Nathria. And while not a damage over time specialist like Assassination is, Subtlety does now have Rupture as part of its finisher toolkit in place of Nightblade. Rupture actually does a pretty respectable amount of damage as Subtlety, which is a nice improvement to Subtlety's 2-target damage potential and again for uptime while not in range of the boss. As I've mentioned before, Covenants are a big source of damage, with Serrated Bone Spike being a very hard-hitting dot, as well as an exceptionally cost-effective combo point generator. Tuning has not occurred at all yet, so this may change before any of this hits live servers, so I'll be keeping up to date on any Covenant ability changes and will inform you folks of anything I learn about that in the future. Subtlety has undergone quite a few fundamental changes in Shadowlands, and I'll eventually be putting together some introductory guides for all three specs. Basically, the playstyle of Subtlety revolves around high amounts of burst damage while using cooldowns such as Shadow Blades. However, the biggest rotational aspect of the spec revolves around the short duration cooldown Shadow Dance, which allows usage of all of your stealth-based moves such as the hard-hitting Shadow Strike, and then combining this with Symbols of Death, a nice damage and energy boost which also guarantees your next combo point generator will be a critical hit. Shadow Dance directly dictates your burst windows, and you have to play around them to deal your most optimal damage. This sort of burst playstyle has a lot of strong advantages over more linear, non-bursty specs, especially on fights where a priority target is active, or in the case of the Sludge Fist encounter, moments where the boss will take increased damage. Subtlety also has a cooldown reduction bonus for Shadow Dance whenever they spend combo points, and this effect is enhanced while running the Enveloping Shadows talent. A potentially stronger option in the case of the Sludge Fist encounter might be to run Dark Shadow, which amps up your damage while in Shadow Dance even further, resulting in even more bursty damage but at the cost of your extra Shadow Dance charge that you gain from the Enveloping Shadows talent on the same row. Regardless, Subtlety is very effective at manipulating the way it generates combo points to spend either in single target finishers or on its new AoE finisher Shadow Vault, which has recently been given a healthy damage increase. This makes Subtlety very versatile in both AoE and single target scenarios. In regards to 2-target encounters, of which there are a fair amount of in Castle Nathria, Subtlety really will only gain the benefit of Rupture or possibly Serrated Bone Spike if you're a Necrolord, which is something we'll need to keep an eye on to see the result of. In regards to Conduits, Subtlety has some very strong options from how they seem so far, and they all scale exceptionally high in percentage. I'm honestly kinda concerned with how well they scale, as they honestly seem pretty darn strong at rank 15, and even at rank 1 they seem very solid. And Subtlety's legendaries. Okay, I need to get this out of the way. Subtlety's legendary options are basically null and void until Akaari's Soul Fragment is balanced. Now, let me explain why I say that really quick. Akaari's Soul Fragment is based off of the Akaari Soul Legion artifact trait, which made you deal some extra damage about 2 seconds after casting a Shadow Strike or a Cheap Shot. The new Shadowlands version does the full damage of Shadow Strike, as well as giving the 2 combo points of a Shadow Strike. More so, the second freebie hit of Shadow Strike can critically hit on top of a critical hit, so it can do quadruple damage. So yeah, basically there is no other option that is remotely even close to the sheer damage and combo point generating power of this legendary. More combo points spent means more Shadow Dances, which then means more Shadow Strikes, which then means more Shadow Dances. I think you see where this pattern is going. So before anyone says to nerf Subtlety because they're two-shotting people in PvP, remember it's because of this legendary that this is occurring. AKA, don't expect this to last for very long once tuning occurs if this somehow makes it to live like this. Seriously. Once this legendary is brought into line with some of the other options, it will be a much more reasonable amount of damage. I personally ended up using the Finality legendary for raid testing as I wanted a more realistic damage value from the spec. I am still practicing Subtlety as I do these videos, but I was able to do a pretty respectable amount of damage even without an absurdly overtuned legendary. I also intentionally avoided the very bugged premeditation talent, again to get a fair comparison. So from all this, the question is, what do I think of Subtlety as being a competitive raiding spec of Rogue? Honestly, with the benefits of solid single target, good priority burst damage, good AoE, and the best mobility of the 3 rogues, there is a pretty good chance that Subtlety will be an exceptionally competitive melee class for Castle Nathria. The raid seems overall as a pretty melee unfriendly place though, but Subtlety has a pretty good toolkit for dealing with encounters and mechanics. The damage when not running Akaari's doesn't blow the other rogue specs out of the water on single target and 2 target fights. However, in higher AoE, such as the Sun King Salvation encounter, Subtlety will very likely pull ahead with its now pretty potent Shadow Vault, which can hit up to 8 targets. As always, tuning can make or break the ideal DPS assortment in an instant, but judging off of toolkit alone and currently some pretty respectable numbers, Subtlety has a good chance at being viable for the first time in almost 2 years. I hope you folks enjoyed this little 3-part series as much as I did making it. It was quite fun to get in and try to see how far off the damage was between the 3 specs, though it was a bit trickier to give each of them a fair shakedown due to the number of quirks, bugs, and overtuned components between the 3. If you enjoyed this video, I'd sincerely appreciate any likes, comments, or subscribes, as they all help tremendously with the channel's growth and it lets me know what sort of content you folks enjoy seeing. If you're new around here, I'd like to welcome you to check out the rest of the channel. I do new uploads every weekday and cover a variety of WoW-related things, though as you can probably tell, I do spend a fair amount of video time on Rogue stuff. As always, I wanted to say how much I genuinely appreciate all of my regular viewers, subscribers, and especially my patrons, who help make these Shiba shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.